Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we slip quietly into the cool darkness along the Nile, where the world still rests between night and morning, and you are already awake before the sun even thinks about rising. The air carries a faint dampness from the river, and the ground beneath your sleeping mat still holds the memory of yesterday's heat. You can hear it if you listen closely. The slow lap of water somewhere beyond the reeds. The soft rustle of dry grasses shifting in a breeze that feels almost too gentle to notice. You stretch, careful not to wake anyone too quickly, though, truthfully, there is no such thing as sleeping in for someone in your position. Farming in ancient Egypt is not a profession that tolerates laziness. In fact, you probably would not survive long if you tried. The Nile sets the pace and you follow. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world you are listening from. Now dim the lights. You sit up slowly, the woven mat beneath you creaking just slightly as your weight shifts. Around you, the small house breathes with quiet life. Someone turns in their sleep. A faint exhale. The soft brush of linen against skin. The walls made from mudbrick, shaped by hands not so different from yours, hold in the night air just long enough to make this moment almost comfortable. You pause, letting your eyes adjust. There is no lamp lit yet. You do not waste oil unless you must. Instead, you rely on the pale hint of light beginning to gather outside. It is not sunrise, not even close, but the darkness has softened. The sky is beginning its slow transformation, though you cannot see it directly from here. You reach for your simple linen garment draped nearby. The fabric feels cool, slightly rough, and familiar. Linen is the standard for people like you. Light, breathable, practical. A widely accepted historical understanding tells us that linen, made from flax grown along the Nile, was the dominant textile in ancient Egypt, especially for ordinary people who needed something suited to relentless heat. You slip it over your body without ceremony. There is no mirror to check yourself, no need to adjust anything beyond what feels right. Your appearance is not the focus of the day. Survival is. Your feet touch the packed earth floor. It is cool now, but you know it will not stay that way for long. By midday, this same surface will feel warm, almost hot beneath your skin. You take a step, then another, moving carefully through the dim space. You know every corner of this home without needing to see it clearly. The low doorway, the storage jars, the place where tools lean quietly against the wall. A faint smell reaches you. Grain. Dry, earthy, reassuring. It comes from the storage jars where last season's harvest still waits, though perhaps not as plentifully as you would like. The scent mixes with something else. Ash from last night's fire, a trace of smoke clinging to the air, soft and familiar. You step outside. The world greets you with a silence that feels full rather than empty. The sky above is a deep fading blue. Stars still linger, though fewer now, their light dimming as dawn approaches. The Nile lies somewhere ahead, invisible in the low light, but its presence is undeniable. You can hear it. You can feel it. It shapes everything. You take a slow breath. The air is cooler here, carrying a hint of moisture that never quite reaches your fields unless you guide it carefully. That is your task. That is always your task. Nearby another door opens, a neighbour perhaps. You do not speak yet. There is a shared understanding in these early hours. Words can wait. Movement comes first. You walk a few steps farther, letting your eyes adjust more fully. The outline of the land begins to reveal itself, low shapes of houses, the faint suggestion of dikes and fields beyond. The horizon, still dark, promises light, but does not deliver it just yet. There is a rhythm to this moment, one that repeats day after day. A commonly acknowledged fact is that ancient Egyptian farmers organised their lives around the Nile's annual cycle of flooding, planting and harvesting, rather than a fixed calendar like the one you might use today. Time for you is not counted in dates, it is measured in water levels, soil conditions, and the slow growth of crops. You bend slightly, picking up a small tool left near the doorway. Its handle is worn smooth from use, shaped by hands over years, perhaps your own, perhaps those who came before you. Tools are not replaced easily here. They are maintained, repaired, passed down. As you straighten, you notice something small near your foot. A line of ants moving with determined purpose, carrying tiny fragments back toward a hidden nest. You watch them for a moment. Even here before sunrise, life is already in motion. A curious detail sometimes noted by researchers is that even in ancient Egypt, people paid close attention to small natural signs like insect behaviour or bird movement, using them as subtle indicators of seasonal change or environmental conditions. You do the same, though you would not call it science. It is simply awareness. You shift your weight and look toward the river again. The sound is clearer now. A soft, steady presence. You know that everything depends on it. Too much water and your fields could be damaged. Too little and your crops will struggle. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how predictable the Nile's flooding truly was for farmers like you. Some suggest it was remarkably consistent, almost reliable to a fault. Others point out that variation could bring uncertainty and stress, especially in years when the water did not behave as expected. For you, it does not matter what scholars will say thousands of years from now. What matters is what the river does this year. A breeze moves across the land, brushing lightly against your skin. It carries a faint scent of wet earth from the direction of the Nile. You close your eyes for a moment, letting that sensation settle. Then slowly you begin to walk. Your steps are unhurried but purposeful. The ground beneath your feet is uneven in places, shaped by countless days of work, by water that has come and gone, by hands that have built and rebuilt the land itself. You move along a familiar path, one that leads toward the fields you will tend. Behind you, the village begins to stir. Another door opens, a quiet voice, the low murmur of someone speaking to a child. The day is waking just as you are. Ahead, the faintest line of light appears along the horizon. You keep walking. The faint light at the horizon grows a little stronger behind you as you step back inside, just long enough to gather what you need before the day fully begins. The shift from open air to enclosed space feels immediate. Outside the world stretches wide and quiet. Inside everything is close shaped by walls that hold not only air but memory. Your eyes adjust again, though the darkness is softer now. The outlines of your home become clearer. The low ceiling supported by simple beams. The mudbrick walls, their surfaces slightly uneven, bearing the marks of hands that shaped them. You know these walls well. You helped repair them not long ago, smoothing cracks with fresh clay after the last season's heat had dried them too harshly. A broadly accepted historical understanding tells us that most rural Egyptian homes in this period were built from sun-dried mud brick using Nile silt mixed with straw. It's practical, easy to produce, and surprisingly effective at keeping the interior cooler during the worst heat of the day. You can feel that even now as the early morning air lingers. You step carefully around the sleeping forms of your household. A child curls near the wall, wrapped loosely in linen. An older relative lies on a woven mat, breathing slow and steady. There is no separation into private rooms in the way you might imagine today. Space is shared. Life overlaps. You pause for a moment, looking down at them. There is a quiet comfort in this closeness, even if it means little privacy. You hear the soft rhythm of their breathing, the occasional shift of fabric. The house feels alive, even in stillness. Near the corner, you reach for a small clay vessel. It holds water drawn yesterday and carefully covered to keep it as clean as possible. You lift it, tilting it slightly, and take a small drink. The water is cool with a faint taste of earth. Not unpleasant, just real. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and set the vessel back in place. Every drop matters. You do not waste it. A small storage area sits nearby, marked by several jars of varying size. You move toward them, lifting a lid just enough to check the contents. Grain. Still there, not overflowing, but sufficient. You let out a quiet breath you did not realize you were holding. A lesser-known detail that sometimes surprises people is that these storage jars were often sealed carefully to protect against pests, moisture and spoilage, sometimes even coated with mud or clay to create a tighter barrier. You run your fingers along the rim, feeling the rough texture, checking for any sign of damage. Satisfied, you replace the lid. The faint sound of movement behind you catches your attention. Someone is waking. You glance back as one of the children stirs, rubbing their eyes, not yet fully aware of the day waiting for them. You offer a small, quiet gesture, not quite a smile, but something close. There will be time for words later. For now, the routine continues. You move toward a low surface where a few simple items rest. A small tool, a piece of cord, a fragment of cloth. Nothing here is decorative in the way you might think of decoration. Everything has a purpose, even if that purpose is simply to be ready when needed. You pick up the cord, checking its strength with a gentle pull. Still good. You coil it loosely and tuck it into place at your side. You do not yet know exactly when you will need it, but experience has taught you that being unprepared is far worse than carrying a little extra weight. The smell of last night's fire lingers faintly near the hearth area. You crouch down, brushing lightly through the ash. A few embers remain barely glowing. With care, you shift them, adding a small bit of dry material to encourage life back into the fire. It is a slow process, patient. You do not rush it. Fire is not just warmth. It is cooking light, safety. Losing it entirely means extra effort to restart it, and effort is something you already spend carefully. As you work, you notice the subtle sounds of the house changing. More movement now, a quiet cough, the soft rustle of someone sitting up. The day is beginning to take shape inside these walls. You stand again, brushing your hands together. The doorway draws your attention once more. Outside, the light has shifted again. The sky is no longer deep blue. It carries a faint grey, almost silver tone. The stars are nearly gone. You step toward the entrance, pausing just at the threshold. There is something about this moment that feels balanced. Inside the safety of familiar walls, outside the demands of the land, waiting patiently. You exist between the two, never fully belonging to one or the other. Scholars continue to debate the extent to which rural Egyptian households, like yours, were entirely self-sufficient or more deeply connected to wider economic systems. Some argue that most needs were met within the village itself. Others suggest that even small farming communities relied on broader networks of exchange and obligation. From where you stand, the distinction feels less important. You do what you must with what you have. A faint breeze slips through the doorway, carrying with it the scent of damp soil and distant water. You close your eyes briefly, letting it settle. Behind you a voice speaks softly, your name perhaps, or simply a sound of acknowledgement. You turn your head slightly enough to show you have heard. There is comfort in this shared beginning, even if the work ahead will separate you for much of the day. You take one last look around the interior. The mats, the jars, the low walls that hold your life together. Nothing here is grand, nothing is unnecessary, yet everything matters. You step outside again. The ground greets your feet with a cool firmness that will soon disappear under the rising sun. The village is no longer silent. Small sounds ripple outward. Doors opening, footsteps, quiet exchanges between neighbours beginning their own routines. You move forward, leaving the shelter of your home behind for now. The fields are waiting. The path toward the fields pulls at you, but your body reminds you of something simple and unavoidable. You need to eat. Not a grand meal, not anything indulgent, just enough to steady your strength before the work begins in earnest. You turn slightly, adjusting your pace, and head toward the small outdoor area where food is prepared. The light has grown stronger now, soft gold beginning to touch the edges of everything. Shapes are clearer, colours begin to return. A low hearth sits near the side of the house, its stones still holding a faint warmth from the night before. A thin thread of smoke curls upward. As someone tends to the fire, you coaxed back to life. The scent is comforting, familiar. Ash heat and the quiet promise of food. You crouch down beside a flat surface where a small loaf of bread rests. It is coarse, darker than what you might imagine from a modern bakery. The texture is uneven, slightly rough to the touch. You break off a piece with your hands, the crust yielding with a soft crack. A well-established historical fact tells us that bread was one of the most essential staples in ancient Egypt, often made from emmer wheat or barley ground by hand into flour and baked into simple loaves. You bring the piece to your mouth and take a bite. The taste is earthy, slightly sour, with a density that makes you chew slowly. It is not delicate, but it is satisfying. It fills your mouth, your stomach, your sense of readiness. Nearby, a clay jug sits partially buried in the ground to keep it cool. You reach for it, lifting it carefully. Inside is beer, though not quite what you might picture. It is thick, cloudy, more like a liquid grain than a crisp drink. You tilt the jug and take a small sip. The flavour is mild, slightly sweet, with a hint of fermentation that lingers at the back of your throat. It is nourishing, not intoxicating, at least not in the quantities you will drink during the day. It gives you energy, hydration, and a sense of steadiness. A curious detail often mentioned by historians is that ancient Egyptian beer was sometimes consumed through straws to avoid the grain sediment floating in it. You glance at the surface of your drink, noticing the small particles suspended within. Today you simply drink carefully, adjusting the tilt so that most of the thicker material stays behind. You set the jug down and take another bite of bread. Around you others are doing the same. A neighbour stands a short distance away, tearing into their own loaf. A child sits cross-legged, holding a smaller piece, chewing with quiet focus. There is little conversation at first. Eating is its own kind of attention. The air carries a mix of smells now. Warm bread, smoke, the faint sweetness of grain. It blends with the freshness of morning, creating a moment that feels grounded, almost calm before the long effort ahead. You swallow, then take another sip of beer, letting it settle in your stomach. There is no rush, but there is no lingering either. You know how long this simple meal must last, until midday, perhaps longer. You eat with awareness, measuring each bite not by taste but by necessity. A voice nearby breaks the quiet. A neighbour offering a brief comment about the coming day. Perhaps a remark about the water levels or the condition of the soil. You nod, responding with a few words of your own. The conversation is light, but it carries weight. Information, even in small pieces, matters. A slight change in the river, a rumour of pests, a memory of last year's conditions, all of it feeds into your understanding of what the day might bring. Scholars continue to debate how varied the diet of ordinary Egyptian farmers truly was. Some argue it was largely repetitive, centred almost entirely on bread and beer, with occasional additions like onions, dates or fish. Others suggest there may have been more variation depending on season and access to resources. As you take another bite, the answer feels simple. You eat what you have. You glance toward the storage area again, thinking ahead. How long will the grain last? How carefully must you ration? These thoughts are never far from your mind. A small bowl sits nearby, holding a few pieces of something softer. Perhaps dates, slightly wrinkled, but still sweet. You pick one up, pressing it gently between your fingers before bringing it to your mouth. The taste is immediate. Sweet, rich, a sharp contrast to the heaviness of the bread. It lingers longer, offering a brief moment of something almost indulgent. You allow yourself that moment. Then it passes. You finish your portion brushing crumbs from your hands. The sensation of fullness is modest, but it is enough. Your body feels steadier, ready to move. You stand stretching slightly, feeling the pull in your muscles. Even before the day's work has truly begun, your body carries the memory of countless previous days. The repetition of effort stored deep within you. The sun edges higher now, just beginning to show itself above the horizon. Light spreads across the land, touching the tops of the distant reeds, glinting faintly on the unseen surface of the Nile. You take a breath deeper this time. The moment of stillness is ending. You glance once more at those around you. A brief exchange of looks, a nod, a shared understanding. Each of you will head in slightly different directions, yet your efforts remain connected. The success of one often supports the survival of another. You pick up your tool again, adjusting your grip. The ground beneath your feet feels different now. Less cool, more alive. The day has begun in full. You step away from the hearth, leaving behind the last traces of smoke and warmth, and turn your focus entirely toward the fields. There is no hesitation. You begin to walk. The last taste of bread and beer lingers faintly as you leave the cluster of homes behind your steps, settling into a steady rhythm. The path beneath your feet is familiar, shaped by years of worn smooth in some places and uneven in others, where water once flowed or the earth shifted slightly under the weight of seasons. Ahead the land opens. The Nile is no longer just a distant presence. You begin to see it now, a wide ribbon of muted silver reflecting the growing light. Its surface appears calm, almost gentle, but you know better. Everything you rely on comes from that slow-moving water. Everything. You walk along the edge of a low embankment, the soil packed firm by countless footsteps and careful shaping. Beyond it lie the fields, divided into sections by narrow ridges and channels. Even in this early light, you can see the faint lines where water once spread and then withdrew, leaving behind a thin layer of dark, fertile silt. A commonly accepted detail about ancient Egyptian agriculture is that the annual flooding of the Nile deposited nutrient-rich sediment across the fields, renewing the soil without the need for artificial fertilizers. You crouch slightly, reaching down to touch the earth. It feels soft, fine, almost silky between your fingers. This is what you depend on. You let the soil fall back to the ground and rise again, your gaze sweeping across the land. Some sections appear darker, still holding more moisture. Others have begun to dry their surface, cracking slightly under the early warmth of the sun. You adjust your path, stepping carefully along the narrow ridges that separate each section. Balance matters here. A misstep could collapse part of the boundary, allowing water to move where it should not. The air feels different out here. Less enclosed, more open. A faint breeze moves across the fields, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and growing plants. It mixes with something sharper. The smell of river water, slightly mineral, slightly alive. You pause for a moment, looking out over the expanse. There is a quiet beauty here, though it is not the kind that invites rest. It demands attention. Every line, every patch of soil, every subtle change in colour tells you something. You have learnt to read these signs the way others might read words. A lesser-known observation, sometimes highlighted by researchers, is that farmers like you developed an intimate, almost instinctive understanding of their land, recognizing minute variations in soil texture or moisture that could influence planting decisions. You do not think of it as knowledge. It is simply what you notice. You begin to walk again, moving toward a section that needs checking. As you approach, you see the shallow channel that guides water from the main flow into the basin. It is narrow, carefully shaped, and slightly uneven in places where the last flow may have been stronger than expected. You kneel beside it, running your hand along the edge. The soil here is firmer, compacted by water and repeated use. You press gently, testing its strength, still holding, for now. You glance towards the river again, judging its level against the markers you have come to trust. A certain rock, a bend in the bank, the height of water against a cluster of reeds. These are your measures. There are no instruments, no written records at your side, only memory and observation. There remains ongoing discussion among experts about how precisely farmers in this era could predict the Nile's behaviour. Some believe the patterns were consistent enough to allow for careful planning. Others suggest that uncertainty always lingered, that even experienced farmers faced years when the flood did not meet expectations. You feel that uncertainty as a quiet tension beneath your routine. You rise and move along the channel, using your tool to scrape away a small build-up of silt that could block the flow. The motion is simple but deliberate. You do not rush. Each movement has a purpose. The sun climbs a little higher, its warmth beginning to touch your shoulders. The coolness of morning is fading. You can feel it in the air, in the ground beneath your feet, even in your own skin. You straighten, wiping your hand against your linen garment, leaving a faint streak of dark soil. It will not be the last. In the distance, you notice another figure moving along a separate section of fields. A neighbour, perhaps. Their movements mirror your own in a way that feels almost synchronized, though you are too far apart to speak. Each of you is engaged in the same quiet conversation with the land. You step forward again, this time toward a slightly elevated area where the soil looks drier. You crouch once more, pressing your fingers into the surface. It resists slightly more here, less moisture. You make a mental note. Water will need to be guided here soon. You look back towards the channel, tracing the path the water must take. A small adjustment here, a slight opening there. It is a system simple in design, but demanding in execution. You stand and take a slow breath. The light has changed again. The sky is now pale blue, the sun fully visible above the horizon. Shadows stretch long across the fields, giving shape to every ridge and furrow. The day has begun in full. You shift your grip on the tool, feeling its weight settle comfortably in your hand. This land is not something you simply work on. It is something you work with, something you negotiate with each day. You take a step forward, then another, moving deeper into the fields. There is no clear beginning or end to this work, only a continuous cycle of attention, adjustment, and effort. And you are already part of it. You move farther into the fields, the soft earth giving slightly beneath your feet as the morning light strengthens. The quiet observation of soil and water shifts into something more physical now. It is time to work, not just to look. You reach the section that has been waiting. The surface here has begun to firm up after the last moisture settled, making it ready for turning. You pause for a moment, scanning the area, measuring it not with numbers but with familiarity. You already know how long this will take. Your body remembers even if you do not think about it. Nearby, a simple wooden plough rests where it was left. Its shape is rough, functional, shaped more by necessity than by design. You walk toward it and run your hand along the handle. The wood is worn smooth in places, splintered in others. It has been repaired more than once. A well-documented fact is that ancient Egyptian farmers often used light wooden ploughs, sometimes drawn by oxen to break the soil after the floodwaters receded. You glance toward the animals tethered a short distance away. They stand quietly, shifting their weight tails, flicking occasionally to brush away insects. You approach them, your movements calm and steady. They know you, not as a friend exactly, but as something familiar. You place a hand against one animal's side, feeling the warmth beneath its hide, the steady rhythm of its breathing. There is a quiet exchange here, not spoken but understood. You need their strength. They tolerate your guidance. You adjust the harness, carefully checking each connection. The cord you brought earlier proves useful now. You tie it securely, ensuring the plough will hold steady when the work begins. Your fingers move with practiced ease, knots forming without hesitation. A small curious detail that sometimes appears in discussions of ancient farming is that ploughs of this period were often quite shallow, scratching the surface rather than deeply turning the soil. It may seem inefficient, but the rich silt left by the Nile made deep ploughing less necessary than in other regions. You consider this not as theory, but as lived experience. The soil does not need to be forced. It only needs to be guided. You take your position behind the plough, gripping the handle firmly. The wood presses against your palms, familiar and unyielding. You give a gentle signal and the animals begin to move. The first pull is always the hardest. The plough resists slightly as it meets the earth, the blade catching then sliding forward as the soil gives way. You lean into it, adjusting your balance, letting your weight help guide the motion. The sound is subtle but constant, a soft scraping as wood and earth meet, the faint crunch of dry particles shifting, the steady rhythm of hooves pressing into the ground ahead of you. You focus on the line, straight, even, consistent. Each step matters. If the line wavers too much, the work that follows becomes more difficult. You keep your eyes on a point ahead, letting your body follow naturally. The sun rises higher, its warmth beginning to settle across your shoulders and back. The coolness of early morning fades quickly now. You feel the change in your skin, in the air, in the way your breath moves. You reach the end of the row and pause, letting the animals rest for a moment. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, leaving a faint trace of sweat and dust. There is no urgency in your pause, but there is no indulgence either. Rest is measured, just enough. You turn the plough, carefully guiding the animals into position for the next line. The motion is practiced efficient. You do not waste energy on unnecessary movement. There's been long-standing discussion among historians about how labour was divided in ancient Egyptian farming communities. Some suggest that tasks like ploughing were primarily the responsibility of adult men, while others note that labour could be more flexible depending on the needs of the household. As you adjust your grip and prepare for the next pass, the question feels distant. Work goes to whoever can do it. You begin again. The second line comes slightly easier. The soil has already been disturbed nearby and your body has settled into the rhythm. Step, guide, adjust, step again. Time begins to shift. Minutes do not pass in the way you might notice them elsewhere. They stretch and compress, measured instead by the length of a row, the turn at the end, the steady repetition of motion. Your hands begin to feel the strain, the constant pressure against the handle, the small adjustments to keep the blade steady. You shift your grip, slightly easing the tension without breaking your flow. An insect buzzes past your ear. You barely notice. The smell of earth grows stronger as more soil is turned. It rises around you dry and rich, mixing with the warmth of the sun and the faint scent of the animals ahead. You reach the end of another row and pause again, this time letting your shoulders relax for a brief moment. You roll them, slightly easing the stiffness that has begun to build. You glance across the fields. Others are working now too, small figures moving in the distance, each following their own pattern, their own section of land. From here, it almost looks calm, ordered, predictable. You know better. Every line you draw into the soil carries a small uncertainty. Will the seeds take root? Will the water come as needed? Will the harvest be enough? You guide the plough into position once more. The work continues. Your body settles deeper into the rhythm movements, becoming more automatic. The strain doesn't disappear, but it becomes familiar, almost expected. The sun climbs. The light sharpens, and you keep going. The steady rhythm of the plough begins to blend with the wider movement around you. You are no longer alone in your effort. As the sun lifts higher, more figures appear along the edges of the fields, each person stepping into their own portion of the day's work. You guide the animals through another pass, then slow them as you approach the boundary between your section and your neighbours. The narrow ridge that separates your plots rises slightly underfoot, firm enough to stand on without crumbling, though it always demands a bit of care. Your neighbour is already there, working with a hoe rather than a plough, breaking apart clumps of soil where the ground has hardened unevenly. Their movements are steady, almost rhythmic, lifting and pressing the tool with practiced control. You pause, letting your animals rest again and exchange a brief greeting. No long conversation, just a few words, perhaps a quiet remark about the condition of the soil or the way the water settled this season. Even these small exchanges carry meaning. Information travels this way from one person to another without formality. A widely recognized observation about rural Egyptian life is that farming communities relied heavily on cooperation between neighbours, especially when managing shared irrigation systems or responding to unexpected challenges. You feel that cooperation in moments like this. No one announces it. It simply exists. Your neighbour gestures toward a section of your field where the soil appears slightly more compact than the rest. You follow their gaze, nodding in acknowledgement. You will attend to it later. In return, you mention a small build-up of silt you noticed near the channel that feeds their side. It's not a warning exactly, more of a quiet offering of awareness. They nod as well. The exchange ends there. You return to your position behind the plough, guiding the animals forward once more. The lines continue, each one joining the last in a pattern that slowly reshapes the surface of the land. As you work, the presence of others becomes part of the background. The soft scrape of tools, the occasional call between neighbours, the low sounds of animals shifting and moving. None of it disrupts your focus. It supports it. You reach the end of another row and pause again, stepping aside to let the animals breathe. Your neighbour has moved slightly closer now, their work bringing them nearer to the boundary. This time the pause stretches just a little longer. A few more words are exchanged. Something about a family member who has been unwell. A comment about a tool that broke and was repaired. The kind of conversation that carries daily life forward without drawing attention to itself. A small, interesting detail sometimes noted by those who study ancient village life is that much of the social structure was maintained through these informal, repeated interactions rather than formal meetings or organised gatherings. Relationships were built in passing moments like this, between tasks, between breaths. You lean slightly on the handle of the plough, listening. There is no need to rush the moment, but you feel the pull of the work waiting. The field does not pause for conversation. You straighten and give a small nod. The exchange closes naturally without any clear ending. You step back into your role and your neighbour does the same. The work resumes. You guide the plough into a section where the soil resists a bit more. You adjust your stance, leaning slightly forward, adding more pressure to keep the blade moving. The animals respond to your shift, pulling a little harder. The line forms, not perfect, but good enough. You glance again toward the compacted area your neighbour pointed out earlier. You make your way there, leaving the plough temporarily at the edge of the row. You take up your hoe, instead gripping it firmly as you position yourself over the stubborn patch. The first strike lands with a dull solid sound. The soil cracks slightly, but not enough. You lift the tool again and bring it down once more, this time with a bit more force. The surface breaks apart, small pieces shifting and loosening under the impact. You continue repeating the motion. Lift, strike, break, lift again. Your muscles respond quickly, settling into the effort. The movement is different from the steady guiding of the plough. It is sharper, more direct, requiring bursts of energy rather than continuous pressure. Sweat begins to form along your arms and back, catching the growing warmth of the sun. You feel it gather, then slide slowly across your skin. The air around you is no longer cool, it carries the first true heat of the day. There has been ongoing discussion among scholars about how communal labour obligations functioned in villages like yours, especially when larger tasks such as maintaining dikes or clearing major channels required coordinated effort. Some suggest these duties were strictly organised, possibly overseen by local officials. Others believe they were more fluid, shaped by mutual need and shared understanding. As you break apart the stubborn soil, the answer feels simple. When something needs doing, people step in. You pause briefly, resting the hoe against your shoulder, and take a breath. The sounds of the field continue around you. A distant voice calling out. The steady pull of another plough. The soft rustle of wind through growing plants. You lower the tool again and finish the last of the compacted section, smoothing it slightly with your foot. Better. You step back, assessing the area. It will take water more evenly now. The effort was worth it. You return to the plough, picking up where you left off. The rhythm comes back quickly, as if it had only been waiting. Step, guide, adjust. Your neighbour has moved farther along their own field, now their figure becoming smaller in your peripheral vision. The distance between you grows, but the connection remains. You are still part of the same pattern, the same shared labour spread across the land. The sun climbs higher still, the shadows shorten, and the quiet network of work continues, each person contributing to something larger than any single field. You keep moving. The soil begins to loosen more easily now, and the lines you draw with the plough settle into a steady pattern across the field. Yet your attention shifts again, pulled towards something less visible but far more decisive than any line you carve into the earth. Water. You slow the animals and guide them toward the edge of the basin where the narrow channel feeds into your section. The ground here feels different underfoot, slightly damp, slightly softer, holding the memory of the last flow. You crouch again, not out of habit this time, but out of necessity. You reach into the shallow channel, letting your fingers dip into the thin layer of water that still lingers. It is cooler than the air, carrying with it the faint silt that makes your land fertile. You lift your hand and watch as droplets fall back, leaving a fine residue on your skin. This is what decides everything. A broadly supported understanding of Nile agriculture is that farmers worked within a basin irrigation system where fields were deliberately flooded and then drained in stages, allowing water to soak into the soil before planting began. You trace the edge of the channel with your hand checking for obstructions. A small build-up of silt has formed along one side, subtle but enough to slow the flow if left alone. You take your tool and begin to clear it, scraping carefully, guiding the excess soil away from the channel. The motion is slower than ploughing, more precise. Every small adjustment changes how the water will move. You pause watching. The water shifts slightly, responding to your effort. It is not dramatic, just a subtle redirection, a faint increase in movement toward the section that needs it. You lean back on your heels, observing the path it takes. A minor detail that sometimes appears in academic discussions is that ancient farmers often used simple markers or visual cues like slight differences in soil colour or plant growth to judge whether water distribution was even across their fields. You notice these differences instinctively. A patch that looks just a bit lighter, a surface that dries a little faster than the rest. You rise slowly and walk along the ridge that borders your basin, scanning the entire area. The height of the ridge matters. Too low and water spills where it should not. Too high and the flow becomes uneven. You press your foot against one section, testing its firmness. It holds. A few steps farther, you notice a small weakness. The soil here has softened more than expected. You crouch again, using your hands and tool to reinforce it, packing the earth tighter, shaping it with deliberate care. The sun continues its climb, the warmth now more insistent on your skin. You feel it along your neck, your arms, even through the thin linen that clings lightly to your body. You stand and wipe your hands again, leaving darker streaks across the fabric. The water continues to move quiet and steady. There is a certain patience required here. You cannot force it. You guide it, encourage it, adjust its path. But ultimately, it follows its own nature. A question that continues to occupy researchers is how much control farmers truly had over these irrigation systems at a local level compared to larger coordinated efforts overseen by officials or communities. Some believe small-scale adjustments like yours were the foundation of the entire system. Others argue that broader management played a more significant role. As you watch the water settle into your field, the distinction feels less important than the immediate result. You walk to the far edge of the basin where the soil appears slightly drier than the rest. You kneel and press your fingers into the surface. It yields, but not as easily as you would like. You glance back toward the channel. A small opening here might help. You return to the edge and carefully widen a section just enough to allow a bit more water to pass through. The flow increases, slightly, barely noticeable unless you are watching closely. You are watching closely. You follow the water with your eyes as it spreads, seeping into the soil, darkening it gradually. The change is slow, almost patient in its own way. You wait. This waiting is part of the work. It is not idle. It is attentive, focused measuring without tools. In the distance, you hear the faint call of someone else working their own channels, perhaps signalling to a neighbour or simply announcing their presence. The sound carries lightly across the fields, then fades. You remain where you are, watching the water. A small ripple catches your attention. Something moving just beneath the surface. Perhaps a small fish or some other creature navigating the shallow flow. It disappears as quickly as it appeared. An unusual but occasionally mentioned observation is that farmers sometimes encountered small aquatic life in their irrigation channels, a reminder of how closely their fields were tied to the living river. You consider it briefly, then return your focus to the task. The soil at the far edge begins to darken more evenly now. Better! You stand and take a slow breath, feeling the heat settle more fully into the day. The coolness of morning has almost completely vanished. You walk the perimeter one more time, checking each section with a careful eye. The ridges hold. The channels flow. The soil drinks what it needs. For now it is enough. You step back toward the centre of your field, your feet, leaving faint impressions that will soon disappear under the shifting surface. The water will continue to do its work unseen once it sinks below, and you will continue to guide it one small adjustment at a time. The water settles into the soil behind you, quiet and unseen, while your attention shifts toward the life that continues beyond the edges of your field. You straighten, easing your back for a moment, and glance toward the village. From here, it looks smaller than it felt earlier, its low shape softened by distance and morning light. You know that work does not begin and end in the fields. You begin walking back along the narrow ridge, your steps careful but unhurried. The path feels warmer now, the sun fully claiming the day. Each movement reminds you that the morning has already carried its share of effort. As you approach the cluster of homes, the sounds change. The steady quiet of the fields gives way to a different rhythm. The scrape of grinding stones, the soft thud of kneading, the murmur of voices rising and falling in conversation. Life here moves in its own pattern, just as essential as the work you left behind. You pass by a doorway and glance inside. A woman sits near a low grinding stone, her hands moving in a practiced motion as she pushes grain across its surface. The sound is steady, almost hypnotic, a soft repeating scrape that fills the space without overwhelming it. A well-established point in the study of ancient Egyptian daily life is that grinding grain into flour was often a labour-intensive task carried out by women requiring strength, patience and time. You watch for a moment, noticing the rhythm of her movement. It is as consistent as your own work in the field. Nearby, another figure tends to a clay vessel, stirring its contents slowly. The smell reaches you even before you see it clearly. Warm, slightly sweet, the scent of brewing. The process takes time, careful attention, and an understanding of how ingredients transform. You step closer, drawn by the familiarity of it. A small exchange of words follows, not long, not elaborate. Perhaps a question about the condition of the fields, perhaps a remark about the heat already building. The conversation flows easily without effort. A subtle detail sometimes highlighted by historians is that much of the knowledge required to sustain daily life in ancient Egypt was passed down informally within households, especially through repeated practice rather than written instruction. You see that here. The movements, the timing, the small adjustments, all learned through doing. You move on, passing another space where linen is being handled. Strips of fabric hang loosely, catching the light. Someone works with careful fingers, smoothing, folding, preparing. Linen is everywhere in your life. from what you wear to what you sleep on to what you use in countless small ways throughout the day. The air here feels slightly different, warmer, filled with the scent of grain, cloth and smoke. It carries a sense of continuity, of tasks that never truly end but simply repeat. You pause again, this time near a large clay jar set partially into the ground. Its surface is cool to the touch, shaded from direct sunlight. You lift the lid, slightly checking its contents. Water again. Still clean, still usable. You replace the lid carefully. There has been ongoing scholarly discussion about how labour within households was divided and valued, particularly in relation to agricultural work. Some interpretations suggest that field labour was seen as more central, while others emphasise that domestic production was equally vital to survival. As you stand here, the distinction feels unnecessary. Without this work, yours cannot continue. A child moves past you carrying a small bundle of something wrapped in cloth. Their steps are quick, purposeful, though slightly uneven. You watch them for a moment, noting the way they handle their task with a mix of care and urgency. They are learning, not through instruction alone, but through participation, through being part of what happens each day. You take a step back, allowing space for movement around you. The area feels more active now, people passing tasks, overlapping voices rising slightly as the morning progresses. You notice a woman lifting a vessel, adjusting it carefully against her hip before walking toward the edge of the village. Water to be gathered or moved. Another task that cannot be delayed. The sun presses down more firmly now. Its presence no longer gentle. You feel it along your shoulders, your arms, even the top of your head. The shade offered by the buildings is limited, shifting as the light changes. You reach for a small piece of cloth tucked at your side and wipe your face, removing the thin layer of sweat that has begun to form again. A minor but intriguing observation sometimes mentioned in discussions of ancient Egyptian life is that people often adapted their daily routines to the heat by pacing their work carefully, shifting between tasks when possible to avoid exhaustion. You feel that instinct now, even if you do not name it. You take a slow breath, letting it settle. There is more to be done. You turn back towards the fields, your step steady, your focus returning to the land that waits. Behind you, the village continues its own rhythm, each task unfolding in quiet coordination with the others. As you move away, the sounds soften again. The scraping of stone fades. The voices become distant. The smell of grain and smoke gives way once more to the scent of earth and water. You step back onto the narrow ridge, the familiar path guiding you forward. The work ahead is waiting, just as it always is. And you return to it without hesitation. The field receives you again without ceremony. The soil, the ridges, the quiet channels all remain as you left them, continuing their slow, patient processes beneath the rising sun. You step into your section and feel the difference immediately. The ground is warmer now, no longer holding the cool softness of early morning. You pause for a moment, not to rest, but to observe. Across the nearby edge of the field, movement catches your eye. A group of children gathers near a shallow patch of earth where the soil has been recently turned. Their voices are light, not loud, but filled with a kind of energy that feels very different from the steady rhythm of adult work. You watch them for a moment. One child carries a small bundle of reeds, attempting to drag it across the ground with more determination than strength. Another crouches nearby, using a stick to draw lines in the soil, mimicking the patterns you and others have carved with ploughs and tools. They are playing, but not entirely. A widely accepted observation is that children in ancient Egyptian farming communities often learned their future roles through imitation, gradually taking on small responsibilities as they grew older. You can see that process unfolding right in front of you. One of them notices you watching and pauses, straightening slightly. There is a brief moment of stillness, then a small, uncertain smile. You return a simple nod, nothing more. Encouragement does not need to be spoken. The child resumes their task, now a little more focused. You step forward, returning your attention to your own work. The plough waits where you left it, the animals shifting slightly as you approach. They sense the continuation before you even take hold of the handle. You guide them back into motion. The line continues. Step, guide, adjust. The rhythm returns easily, as if it had only been paused, not broken. Your body remembers settling into the movement with quiet familiarity. As you work, the children remain within your awareness. Their voices drift in and out, carried by the breeze. A brief laugh, a call, the soft thud of small feet against the earth. One of the older children moves closer to the edge of the field, watching you more carefully now. Not just observing, but studying. You can feel their attention even without looking directly at them. You reach the end of a row and pause, turning the plough. When you begin the next line, you notice the child attempting to follow your movement at a distance, dragging their stick through the soil in a rough imitation of your path. The line they create is uneven, wandering slightly, but the intention is clear. You allow yourself a brief moment of quiet acknowledgement. A lesser known but fascinating detail sometimes discussed is that children in ancient Egypt were often introduced to work, gradually starting with simple, manageable tasks before taking on more demanding responsibilities. You can see the beginnings of that process here. You continue your work, not correcting, not instructing directly. The learning happens through watching through, trying through, repeating. The sun climbs higher, its light growing sharper. The shadows that once stretched long across the field have shortened, pulling closer to the objects that cast them. The heat settles more firmly against your skin. You feel it in your shoulders, your back, your arms. Sweat gathers again, this time more quickly, tracing familiar paths along your body. You shift your grip slightly, adjusting to the increased strain. The animals continue their steady pull, their movements consistent, their pace unchanged. They too are part of this rhythm, responding to your guidance without question. You reach another endpoint and pause, stepping aside to let them rest briefly. The child who had been watching now stands closer than before, still outside the boundary of your work, but near enough to see clearly. They hold the stick loosely, looking from it to the plough, then back again. You meet their gaze for a moment. There is curiosity there, and something else. Anticipation, perhaps. You gesture lightly toward the ground, indicating a small area where the soil has already been turned and will not be disturbed further. It is not an instruction, not quite an invitation, but something in between. The child hesitates, then steps forward. They press the stick into the soil, attempting to draw a line. It wavers shallow in some places, deeper in others. They are just trying again, focusing more carefully this time. You watch briefly, then return to your own task. There's an ongoing conversation among historians about how structured education was for rural children in ancient Egypt, particularly outside of elite or scribal contexts. Some suggest that most learning was entirely practical, rooted in daily activity, rather than formal instruction. As you guide the plough forward, once more, the answer seems evident in front of you. Learning happens here in the field, in the dust under the sun. You continue your work, the lines forming steadily, the soil turning as it should. Behind you, the child continues their imitation, their movements becoming slightly more controlled with each attempt. The line they create is still imperfect, but it is improving. Time passes. The sounds of the village are distant now, replaced by the closer, more immediate sounds of the field. The scrape of tools, the quiet movement of animals, the occasional call carried on the breeze. You reach the end of another row and pause again, your breath slightly heavier now. The heat is no longer something you notice occasionally, it is constant pressing, unavoidable. You take a moment to stand still, letting your body settle. Then without hesitation, you turn the plough once more. The work continues. The line you carve into the soil fades behind you as your attention shifts toward a different kind of presence in the fields. It is subtle at first, not a sound exactly, more a change in the way people move, a slight tightening of posture, a glance held a little longer than usual. You notice it before you see them. At the far edge of the cultivated land, near where the fields meet the path that leads toward larger settlements, a small group approaches. Their pace is steady, deliberate, not hurried yet unmistakably purposeful. You slow your movement, allowing the plough to come to a stop. The animals shift, grateful for the pause, their breath visible in the warming air. You straighten, resting one hand on the handle, and watch. The figures become clearer as they draw nearer. Two men walk at the front, their posture upright, their clothing slightly finer than what you and your neighbours wear. Behind them another carries a bundle of items, tools perhaps, or something used for recording. A commonly accepted historical understanding is that agricultural production in ancient Egypt was closely monitored by officials, often scribes, who recorded harvests and assessed taxes owed to the state or temple authorities. You feel that understanding not as a concept, but as a presence moving toward you across the field. You take a slow breath. Around you others have noticed as well. Movement slows, conversations quiet. No one stops entirely, but there is a clear shift in awareness. The group reaches the boundary of the fields and pauses briefly, surveying the land. One of the men gestures slightly, speaking to the others in a tone that carries just enough to be heard without being intrusive. You cannot make out every word, but the meaning is clear enough. Observation, assessment, measurement. They begin to walk along the edges of the plots, moving from one section to another. Occasionally they stop, examining the soil, the condition of the plants, the layout of the irrigation channels. You guide your animals a few steps forward, then stop again, positioning yourself where you can continue working while remaining aware of their presence. One of the officials approaches your section. You lower your gaze slightly, not in submission exactly, but in acknowledgement. There is a balance here. Respect without excess. He steps onto the ridge, his sandals pressing into the packed earth. His eyes move across your field, taking in the lines you have drawn, the condition of the soil, the flow of water. He speaks, a question brief and direct. You respond in kind, your voice steady, offering the information he seeks. The exchange is simple, but it carries weight. A lesser-known insight from surviving records suggests that scribes often used tools like cords or measuring rods to estimate field size and productivity, translating the land's potential into numbers that could be recorded. You notice the cord carried by one of the men behind him, coiled neatly, ready for use. The official nods, once a small, almost imperceptible movement. He gestures to the man behind him, who steps forward and begins to take measurements, stretching the cord across a portion of your field. The process is methodical, careful. Each length is noted, each section considered. You stand still for a moment watching. There is no immediate consequence here, no sudden change. Yet the presence of this measurement, this recording, connects your daily labour to something larger, something beyond your direct control. A point that continues to invite discussion among scholars is how fair or burdensome these tax systems were for farmers, especially in years when conditions were less favourable. Some interpretations suggest a relatively stable system that allowed for predictability. Others hint at pressures that could become difficult to manage. As you observe the cord being stretched across your field, the question feels distant but not irrelevant. The measurement ends. The cord is gathered again, coiled with practiced efficiency. The scribe makes a mark on a surface you cannot clearly see, recording something that will outlast this moment. The official looks at you once more. A brief exchange follows, perhaps a confirmation, perhaps a simple acknowledgement of the work done. His tone remains even, neither harsh nor warm. Then he moves on. The group continues along the fields, repeating the process with others. Their presence lingers even as they move farther away, a quiet reminder of the structure that surrounds your life. You release a breath you had not fully noticed holding. Around you, the rhythm of the field begins to return. Tools move again with their usual cadence. Voices rise slightly, though still measured. You step back into your work. The plough moves forward once more, the blade cutting into the soil with the same steady motion as before. Yet something has shifted, however subtly. Your labour now feels slightly more visible, slightly more connected to something beyond the immediate needs of your household. A curious detail, sometimes noted in ancient records, is that scribes themselves were highly trained and often held a respected position in society, despite not engaging in physical labour like yours. You consider this briefly, then let the thought pass. The sun continues its climb, the heat pressing down more firmly with each passing moment. You guide the plough through another line, your focus returning to the ground beneath you. The officials are already moving toward the far edge of the fields, their figures growing smaller as they continue their work elsewhere. Their presence fades, but its effect remains. You continue. Step, guide, adjust. The land still demands your attention regardless of who watches, and you give it. The figures of the officials grow smaller until they are little more than shapes against the brightness of the morning. Their presence fades into the distance, yet the feeling they leave behind lingers quietly in your thoughts as your hands return to the steady grip of the plough. The land in front of you does not change. The soil still needs turning. The water still needs guiding. The work continues with or without witnesses. You lead the animals forward again, letting the rhythm settle back into your body. The scrape of wood through earth returns as the dominant sound, steady and grounding. Each line you draw seems to restore a sense of order that the interruption briefly disturbed. Yet your mind drifts just slightly. Beyond these fields, beyond the village, beyond even the stretch of the Nile, you can see from here there is something larger. You feel it more than you understand it. A structure of power that reaches outward from places you will likely never visit. Temples, palaces, the presence of the one who rules. A widely recognized aspect of ancient Egyptian society is that much agricultural land was technically owned by the state, the temples, or the crown, with farmers working it and providing a portion of their harvest in return. You feel that reality not as ownership on paper, but as an expectation woven into your life. You do not question it often. There is little reason to. Your focus remains on what you can control. You guide the plough to the end of another row and pause, letting the animals rest again. You step aside, stretching your back slightly, feeling the pull of muscles that have already been working for hours. As you straighten your gaze drifts toward the far horizon, you cannot see any grand buildings from here, no towering structures or gleaming stone, but you know they exist. You have heard stories. Perhaps you have seen them once from a distance during a journey you rarely think about now. Temples where offerings are made. places where the gods are honoured, where rituals are performed to ensure balance and order in the world. A lesser known but intriguing idea sometimes discussed is that farmers like you were deeply connected to these larger religious systems, even if your daily experience of them was indirect through festivals, local shrines, or the demands placed upon your labour. You feel that connection in small ways, in the timing of the flood, in the success or failure of a crop, in the quiet hope that things will continue as they should. You step back toward the plough and begin another line. The soil gives way more easily now, in some sections the earlier work having softened it. Your movements feel smoother, more efficient. The effort is still there, but it flows more naturally. The sun climbs higher still, its light bright and clear. The air feels heavier, the warmth pressing more insistently against your skin. You feel the sweat gather again more quickly now, tracing familiar paths along your arms and back. You ignore it. There is no point in dwelling on discomfort that cannot be avoided. You reach the end of another row and pause, stepping aside once more. This time you walk a short distance away from the plough toward a slightly raised area where you can see more of the surrounding land. From here, the fields stretch outward in uneven patterns, each section shaped by the hands that tend it. The village sits quietly beyond its movement, less visible from this distance. You take a slow breath. There is a sense of scale here that is easy to overlook when you are focused on a single task. So many fields, so many people, each contributing in their own way to something larger. A question that continues to interest historians is how centralised control over agriculture truly functioned in practice. Some suggest a highly organised system with clear oversight. Others propose that local management played a more significant role, with central authority acting more as a guiding presence than a constant force. As you stand here, looking out over the land, the truth feels somewhere in between. You turn back toward your work. The plough waits. The animals shift slightly as you approach, ready to move again. You take your position and guide them forward. The rhythm returns. Step, guide, adjust. The field responds. The line forms. Your thoughts settle once more into the immediate, into the physical reality of the task at hand. The distant structures of power, the unseen temples, the figure of the ruler who exists far beyond your daily life, all recede into the background. What remains is the soil beneath your feet, the tool in your hands, the steady pull of the animals ahead. You continue. The sun rises higher. The shadows shorten further. The day presses on, and you move with it, part of a system both vast and intimate, distant and immediate, unseen and deeply felt. And the work does not stop. The sun now stands high enough to press its full weight upon you. What began as a gentle warmth has become something constant, something that settles into your skin and does not leave. The air feels thicker, less forgiving, and every movement carries a little more effort than it did before. You guide the plough through another stretch of soil, your hand steady but your grip tightening slightly as sweat gathers along your palms. The wood feels different now, warmer, slightly slick. You adjust your hold, shifting your fingers just enough to keep control without losing rhythm. Your linen garment clings lightly to your body, damp in places where the heat has drawn moisture from you. It is thin, practical, designed for this kind of environment, yet even so it cannot fully protect you from the sun's presence. An often noted fact about ancient Egyptian clothing is that linen was favoured not just for tradition, but for its ability to remain breathable in extreme heat, allowing the body to release warmth more effectively than heavier materials. You feel that benefit now, even if it is only partial. Still, the heat is relentless. You reach the end of another row and stop, letting the animals rest again. Their sides rise and fall more noticeably. Now they're breathing heavier, though still controlled. You step aside, placing a hand briefly against one of them, feeling the warmth of its body, the steady rhythm beneath its skin. You move a short distance away, seeking what little shade you can find along a low rise in the land. It's not much, just a slight reduction in the direct intensity of the sun, but it is enough to make a difference. You stand there for a moment, letting your body settle. The ground beneath your feet is no longer cool in any sense. It holds the heat, reflecting it upward. Even the air seems to shimmer slightly as it rises from the surface. You lift your hand to your face, wiping away the thin layer of sweat that has formed. It returns almost immediately. A small curious observation sometimes mentioned in studies of ancient daily life is that people in hot climates often developed an acute awareness of their own bodies, learning to pace their movements and conserve energy in ways that might not be as necessary in cooler environments. You feel that awareness now. You take a slow breath. In, out. You measure your effort not in time but in endurance. A faint buzzing sound drifts past your ear. An insect persistent, drawn to moisture or movement. You brush it away with a small flick of your hand, barely interrupting your focus. Your skin feels alive with sensation. Heat, sweat, the occasional brush of wind that offers brief relief before fading again. You are aware of every part of your body in a way that is difficult to ignore. There is also discomfort. The ground, the tools, the repetition of motion. Your shoulders carry a steady ache, now your back tightening slightly with each pass of the plough. It's not sharp pain, not something that stops you. It is something deeper, a constant reminder of effort. A topic that continues to invite discussion among scholars is the long-term physical impact of agricultural labour on ancient populations. Some evidence suggests that repetitive tasks like ploughing, grinding grain, and hauling water left clear marks on the body over time. As you roll your shoulders, slightly easing the tension, you feel that possibility in a very immediate way. You step back toward the plough. The animals have rested enough. They shift as you approach, ready to continue. You take hold of the handle again, your hands finding their place without hesitation. The warmth of the wood meets your skin once more. You begin. The first step feels heavier than it did earlier. Your legs respond, but with a subtle resistance. You push through it, letting the movement settle into your muscles again. The line forms. The soil parts. The rhythm returns, though it carries a different weight now. Step, guide, adjust. You focus on the movement itself, letting it carry you forward. Thinking too much about the heat, the strain, the distance left to cover does not help. The work is done one motion at a time. A faint breeze moves across the field, barely noticeable, but enough to lift the edge of your garment slightly. It passes quickly, but you feel it. Relief, however, brief. You continue. The sun climbs higher still, though it feels as if it has already reached its peak. The light is sharp clear, casting shorter shadows that cling closely to the shapes that create them. You reach the end of another row and pause again, your breath a little heavier now. You do not stop for long. There is no clear signal to rest, no bell, no voice telling you to pause. You decide when to stop, when to continue, guided by what your body can sustain. You take another breath, steadying yourself. Then you turn the plough once more. The work continues. The heat does not lessen. The strain does not disappear. But neither does your movement. You keep going, one line after another, your body adjusting, enduring, finding a way to continue within the limits set by the day. And the sun remains above you, constant, unwavering. The heat settles deeper into the day, pressing down with a steady insistence that never quite lets go. You continue guiding the plough for a while longer, but your attention begins to shift again, drawn towards the movement of life around you, that does not follow the same straight lines as your work. A soft honking sound carries across the field. You glance up. Near the edge of a wetter section, a small group of geese wanders through the shallower ground, their bodies low, their necks moving with quick, curious motions. They dip their beaks into the damp soil, pulling at whatever they find beneath the surface. You slow your pace slightly, watching them for a moment. An established point in the study of ancient Egyptian rural life is that geese and other birds were commonly kept by farming households valued for their meat, eggs, and sometimes even their feathers. These are not wild wanderers entirely. They belong somewhere nearby, though they move freely enough to make the distinction feel less clear. One of them lets out another call louder this time, as if announcing its presence to the entire field. The sound cuts through the steady quiet of your work, then fades. You guide the animals to a stop and take a short break, stepping away from the plough once more. Your legs welcome the pause, even if your mind remains alert. A few steps away, a small enclosure sits near the boundary of the field, constructed from simple materials. Inside a pair of cattle shifts, slowly their movements calm their eyes, half-lidded against the brightness. You walk toward them. The ground here is more worn, marked by repeated footsteps and the weight of animals moving in a confined space. You reach out, placing a hand against the side of one of them, feeling the warmth, the steady presence that mirrors the animals you have been working with. They are not just tools. They are part of your life in a way that goes beyond the field. A lesser-known observation sometimes mentioned in research is that livestock in ancient Egypt were often counted and recorded carefully, not just for taxation, but as indicators of wealth and stability within a household. You consider this briefly glancing at the animals before you. Their condition matters. Their strength matters. Without them, your work would be slower, harder, perhaps even impossible to sustain in the same way. You check the simple bindings that hold the enclosure together, adjusting one that has loosened slightly. The movement is small, almost automatic. Maintenance never ends. It simply shifts from one thing to another. A faint movement near your foot draws your attention. A small beetle moves across the ground, its dark body catching the light as it navigates the uneven surface. It pauses briefly, then continues undeterred by the scale of the world around it. An interesting cultural detail occasionally highlighted is that the scarab beetle held symbolic meaning in ancient Egypt, associated with renewal and the movement of the sun, though here in this moment it is simply another small creature sharing your space. You watch it for a second, then let your gaze move on. From the far side of the field you hear the low sound of cattle being guided, the voice of another farmer carrying faintly across the distance. The animals respond with slow, deliberate steps, their presence adding another layer to the living landscape around you. You return your attention to your own animals, checking the harness once more before leading them back toward the plough. They follow without resistance. The ground feels slightly different underfoot now, more compacted, where animals have passed repeatedly. You step carefully, adjusting your balance as needed. As you position yourself behind the plough again, you take a brief moment to look across the field. The geese have moved farther along, their shapes smaller now, their calls less frequent. The cattle in the enclosure settle back into stillness. The beetle is gone from sight, lost somewhere in the uneven surface of the earth. Everything continues. A question that still draws interest among historians is how closely integrated animal management was with crop cultivation in everyday practice. Some interpretations suggest a seamless relationship with animals, contributing to labour food, and even fertilization. Others emphasize the challenges of balancing these needs within limited space and resources. As you take hold of the plough again, the answer feels present in your daily routine. You begin. The blade meets the soil once more, cutting through with a familiar resistance. Your hands steady, your body adjusts, and the rhythm returns. Step, guide, adjust. The animals pull their strength, translating into movement, into progress, into the quiet reshaping of the land. The sun remains high, the heat constant, the air carrying the layered sense of earth, animals, and growing things. You move forward part of this network of life that extends beyond your own effort. And the work continues, shaped not only by your hands, but by every living thing that shares this space with you. The rhythm of your work steadies again, but your thoughts drift drawn, not by the soil or the animals this time, but by something quieter, something that does not press against your body in the same way as heat or effort. You reach the end of another row and pause, stepping back from the plough. The animals stand still, grateful for the break, their sides moving slowly as they breathe. You straighten and turn slightly towards the direction of the village. From here, it is only a short walk to the small space near your home where a few objects rest. They are not tools, not in the same sense as the plough or the hoe, yet they are used just as regularly, just as carefully. You begin to walk. The ground feels firm beneath your feet, the path familiar. The sounds of the field soften behind you as you move closer to the cluster of homes. The air carries different scents here, less of open soil, more of smoke grain, and the quiet presence of daily life continuing. You reach the doorway of your home and step inside. The interior feels dim after the brightness outside, but your eyes adjust quickly. The shapes of the room settle into place. The mats, the jars, the small objects arranged with care along a low surface near the wall. You move toward them. There resting together are a few simple figures. Small shaped forms, worn smooth by time and handling, perhaps a figure of a household god, perhaps a symbol you have seen since childhood, its meaning understood not through explanation but through repetition. A well-recognized aspect of ancient Egyptian life is that religion was not confined to large temples or formal ceremonies, but was woven into daily routines, often expressed through small household shrines and personal acts of devotion. You reach out, touching one of the figures lightly. The surface is cool, familiar. You do not speak loudly. There is no need. Your thoughts settle into a quiet form shaped by habit, by belief, by the simple desire for things to continue as they should, for the river to rise and fall in its proper time, for the crops to grow, for your family to remain safe. You close your eyes briefly. There is no clear beginning or end to this moment. It is not separate from your day. It is part of it, as necessary in its own way as any physical task. A subtle detail sometimes mentioned in studies of ancient religion is that personal rituals could be highly individual, shaped by family traditions or local customs, rather than strict formal rules. You feel the individuality here. This is not something imposed from outside. It belongs to you. You open your eyes again. The room remains quiet, the objects unchanged, yet something within you feels slightly steadier. You step back. There is more to be done. You turn and move toward the doorway, again stepping back into the brightness of the day. The transition is immediate. The light, the heat, the open space. Everything returns at once. You pause just outside, taking a slow breath. From somewhere nearby, you hear the faint sound of another voice speaking softly, perhaps engaged in a similar moment of quiet reflection. It blends into the background, part of the fabric of life here. There's been ongoing discussion among scholars about how deeply religious belief influenced everyday decisions for ordinary people in ancient Egypt. Some suggest it was central to nearly every aspect of life, guiding actions both large and small. Others propose that practical concerns often took precedence, with belief serving more as a background presence. As you step forward, returning to the path that leads back to your field, the two feel intertwined rather than separate. You walk steadily, the ground warm beneath your feet. The field comes back into view unchanged in your absence. The plough waits where you left it. The animals stand quietly, shifting their weight as they notice your return. You approach them, placing your hand briefly against one, re-establishing the connection. You take hold of the plough again. The moment of stillness fades, replaced by movement. Step, guide, adjust. The rhythm resumes as if it had never paused. The sun remains high, the air thick with warmth, the land stretching out before you with the same quiet demands. Yet something subtle has shifted. Not in the field, not in the tools, but within you. A small steadiness carried from that brief moment inside now moves with you as you continue your work. And the day goes on. The steadiness you carry with you lingers quietly as you guide the plough through another stretch of soil. The rhythm holds familiar and grounding, yet the heat presses deeper now, drawing more from your body with each movement. You reach the end of a row and pause again, your breath heavier than before. This time, instead of turning immediately, you step away from the plough and walk toward the edge of the field where a small shaded area forms beside a low structure of stacked materials. It is not much shade, but it is enough to offer a brief sense of relief. You lower yourself to sit the ground warm beneath you and rest your forearms on your knees. The pause is longer this time, not indulgent but necessary. Your body speaks in small signals. The tightness in your shoulders, the slow ache in your back, the dryness in your throat. You reach for the small vessel you brought earlier and take a careful drink. The water is no longer as cool as it was, but it still brings relief, spreading through you in a way that feels immediate and essential. You take another small sip, then stop. You cannot afford to finish it too quickly. A commonly acknowledged detail about life in ancient Egypt is that access to clean water was both constant and uncertain. The Nile provided it, but it still had to be collected, stored and protected from contamination. You look at the vessel in your hand, aware of its importance. You set it down beside you. A faint cough from nearby draws your attention. You turn your head and see another farmer sitting a short distance away, also taking a break. Their posture is slightly hunched, their hand resting against their chest for a moment before falling back to their side. You watch briefly, not intruding but aware. Illness is never far from life here. It does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it begins with something small, a cough, a fever, a weakness that lingers longer than expected. A lesser known but significant detail is that ancient Egyptians developed a range of remedies using plants, minerals and simple treatments, many of which were recorded in medical texts that have survived to this day. You think of this as you glance at the other farmer. Perhaps they will recover quickly, perhaps not. You look down at your own hands. The skin is rough, marked by small cuts, calloused from repeated effort. You flex your fingers slightly, feeling the stiffness that has settled in. You do not think of it as injury, it is simply part of the work. Yet you know there are limits. There's been considerable discussion among historians about how vulnerable ordinary farmers were to illness and injury, especially without access to advanced medical care. Some suggest that strong community support helped individuals recover and continue. Others note that even minor conditions could become serious if left untreated. As you sit here feeling the weight of the day in your body, the question feels close. You take another breath. The air is still the heat pressing gently but persistently. A small insect lands briefly on your arm, then moves on. You barely notice. Your thoughts drift for a moment not far, just enough to consider the balance you maintain each day. Work and rest, strength and strain, the constant effort to keep yourself able to continue. You reach for the water again, taking one more careful sip. Then you rise. The movement is slow at first, your body adjusting from stillness back into motion. You roll your shoulders slightly, easing the tension that has gathered there. The field waits. The plough waits. You step back toward it, your feet firm against the ground. The animals shift as you approach, their own rest ending as yours does. You place your hand briefly against one, feeling the familiar warmth of the steady presence. You take hold of the plough once more. The handle feels warm, almost hot now, under the sun. You adjust your grip, ignoring the discomfort. You begin again. The first steps feel heavier, your muscles responding more slowly than before. But the rhythm returns as it always does. Step, guide, adjust. The soil parts. The line forms. Your body settles back into the movement, the earlier pause already fading into the background of the day. The other farmer you noticed earlier has stood as well, returning to their own work. Their posture is steady, their movement deliberate. The field fills again with quiet activity. The sun remains high. The heat remains constant. And you continue aware of your body, aware of its limits, yet moving forward all the same. Because stopping is not an option. Not for long, not here. The lines you carve into the soil continue, but the day has reached a point where the work shifts, if only slightly. The sun stands high, and the intensity of the heat presses against everything's slowing movements, stretching each task just a little longer than before. You guide the plough through one more pass, then bring the animals to a stop. This time the pause feels more decisive. Not the brief rests that come and go, but a moment where the rhythm of the field loosens its grip just enough for something else to enter. You step away, wiping your hands against your garment, and look toward the river. The Nile glints under the midday light, brighter now, its surface reflecting the sun in small shifting patterns. From here you can see more movement along its edge, figures walking, a small boat drifting slowly near the bank. You begin to walk. The path toward the river is familiar, though you do not always take it at this time of day. Today the pull is stronger, perhaps for water, perhaps for something less defined. The ground changes as you approach. The soil becomes slightly more compacted, marked by repeated use, by footsteps that have travelled this route many times before. The air carries a stronger scent of water, now mixed with something else. A hint of fish, a trace of damp vegetation. You reach the bank and pause. The river lies before you, wide and steady, its movement slow enough to seem almost still. Yet you know it is always in motion, always carrying something from one place to another. A foundational point in understanding ancient Egypt is that the Nile functioned as the primary route for transportation and trade, connecting distant regions in a way that land travel could not easily achieve. You watch as a small boat moves along the surface, its shape simple, its progress unhurried. On board, a few figures sit or stand, their outlines softened by distance. Perhaps they carry goods. Perhaps they travel for other reasons. From here, it is impossible to know. You step closer to the edge, crouching slightly to reach the water. You dip your hand in letting the coolness spread across your skin. It feels different from the stored water you drank earlier. Fresher, alive in a way that is difficult to describe. You lift your hand and let the droplets fall back. Nearby, a small group of people gathers along the bank. One holds a bundle, another gestures toward the water, speaking in a low voice. You catch fragments of conversation, trade perhaps, an exchange of goods, grain for something else, fish maybe. A curious detail sometimes noted in discussions of daily life is that even small-scale farmers could participate in local trade, exchanging surplus or specialised goods within their region, often using the river as a convenient meeting point. You watch the interaction unfold, quiet and efficient. A bundle changes hands. A brief nod. The exchange is complete. You remain where you are observing. The river does not pause for any of this. It continues its slow movement, indifferent to the small exchanges that take place along its edge. A question that continues to draw attention from historians is how interconnected rural communities were through trade and communication, especially for those who spent most of their time working the land. Some suggest that even isolated villages maintained regular contact through river routes. Others believe that daily life remained largely local, with only occasional interaction beyond immediate surroundings. As you watch the boat drift farther along the water, the answer feels balanced between the two. You stand again, brushing your hands lightly against your garment. The heat here feels different. The presence of water softens it slightly, though the sun remains strong. A faint breeze moves across the surface, carrying a brief sense of relief. You take a slow breath. For a moment, the demands of the field feel distant, not gone, just waiting. You turn your gaze along the length of the river, following its path as it curves gently out of sight. You imagine where it leads, places you have never seen, settlements larger than your own, structures more elaborate than anything nearby. Then you let the thought pass. You step back from the edge, your feet finding the path again. The field calls you back, not with urgency, but with certainty. There is more to be done, and the time for doing it has not yet passed. You begin to walk. The sounds of the river fade gradually behind you, replaced once more by the quieter, more familiar rhythm of the land. The path rises slightly, the soil underfoot shifting from damp to dry. The fields come back into view. The plough waits where you left it. The animals stand quietly, their forms steady against the brightness of the day. You approach them without hesitation. Your hand finds the handle. The rhythm returns. Step, guide, adjust. The river remains behind you, carrying its distant connections forward, while you continue shaping the land beneath your feet. And the day moves on. The return to the field feels quieter after the movement and soft murmur of the riverbank. The sounds here are steadier, more predictable, shaped by repetition rather than exchange. Yet as the day stretches into its later hours, something begins to shift again, not in the soil or the water, but in the feeling that moves through the people around you. You notice it first in the distance, a faint rhythm, barely more than a suggestion at first. Not the scrape of tools or the low call of animals, but something lighter, a beat perhaps, a pattern that does not belong to labour. You pause at the end of a row, lifting your head slightly. The sound carries across the fields, growing clearer as the breeze shifts. A drum, simple but steady, voices following, rising and falling in a way that feels different from conversation. You step away from the plough again, your attention drawn toward the village. It is not a full gathering, not the kind that halts all work, but there is a loosening of the day's strict rhythm. A moment where effort bends just slightly, making space for something else. You begin to walk. The path feels familiar under your feet, though your pace is slower this time. Not driven by urgency, but by curiosity. As you approach the village, the sounds become clearer. Music, voices. A small group has gathered near an open space between the homes. Some stand, others sit, a few moving gently in time with the rhythm. The drum is held by one person, its surface struck in a steady pattern that anchors everything else. An established aspect of ancient Egyptian culture is the importance of festivals and communal gatherings, often tied to religious observances or seasonal changes where music, dance and offerings played a central role. What you see here is not a grand festival, but something smaller, a moment of shared release within the structure of daily life. You stop at the edge of the gathering. No one calls out to you directly, yet your presence is acknowledged. A glance, a slight shift to make space, an unspoken invitation to be part of it, even if only for a short while. The rhythm continues. A voice rises above the others, singing words you have heard before, though perhaps never in exactly the same way. The melody is simple repeating, easy to follow, even without thinking. A few people move more actively now, their steps light, their gestures expressive, without being elaborate. The movement is not formal, not practiced in the way of performance. It is natural, shaped by the music itself. You feel something loosen within you. Not fully, not enough to forget the work waiting in the field, but enough to allow a brief shift in focus. A small, intriguing detail sometimes mentioned in historical studies is that music and dance in ancient Egypt were not limited to elites or formal ceremonies, but were present in everyday life, offering moments of expression and connection across social levels. You see that here. You remain at the edge, not stepping fully into the centre, but not turning away either. The drum continues its steady beat. The voices rise and fall. The sun remains high, though its intensity has begun to soften just slightly, hinting at the gradual approach of later afternoon. A question that continues to interest historians is how frequently ordinary sedentary people engaged in these moments of communal activity, and whether they were structured events or spontaneous gatherings shaped by circumstance. As you watch the movement unfold, the answer feels less important than the experience itself. You take a slow breath. The air carries a mix of scents now. Dust, warmth, a faint trace of food being prepared somewhere nearby. It blends with the sound, creating a moment that feels fuller than the work alone. Someone near the centre laughs softly, the sound light unforced. You find yourself responding not with words, but with a slight shift in posture, a small release of tension in your shoulders. Time passes, though it feels different here, not measured in rows or tasks, but in beats, in voices, in the rise and fall of shared presence. Then gradually the rhythm begins to slow. The drum softens. The voices fade. The movement settles back into stillness. There is no clear ending, no announcement that the moment is over. It simply eases, dissolving back into the flow of the day. People begin to move again, returning to their tasks, their routines, their responsibilities. You step back. The field calls you once more. You turn and begin to walk, the sounds of the gathering fading behind you as the familiar rhythm of work returns to the front of your mind. The path feels warmer now, though the edge of the heat has softened slightly. The light has shifted, becoming less sharp, more angled. You reach your field. The plough waits. The animals stand ready. You take your place again. The rhythm returns. Step, guide, adjust. Yet something lingers. A trace of the music, a memory of movement. It does not change the work, but it moves with you as you continue. The echo of music fades slowly, replaced once again by the steady, grounded sounds of the field. The soil beneath your feet, the quiet pull of the animals, the soft scrape of the plough, all return to the front of your awareness. Yet the day has shifted. The light is different now, slightly angled, no longer directly overhead. You guide the plough forward, but your attention drifts to the edges of the land. Something feels off. Not immediately obvious, not dramatic, but present in small ways. The soil in one section appears lighter than expected. A patch that should hold more moisture seems to have dried faster than it should. You slow, then stop. You step away from the plough and walk toward the area, crouching to examine it more closely. You press your fingers into the surface. It resists more than it should at this point in the day. You look back towards the channel. The water has not reached this far evenly. You stand your gaze moving across the field, tracing the path the water should have taken. The pattern is clear enough now. A slight imbalance. Not enough flow to this section. A widely accepted understanding is that even small variations in water distribution could have significant effects on crop growth in ancient Egyptian agriculture, especially in years when the flood was less than ideal. You feel that reality here in the dryness beneath your fingers. You walk back to the channel, examining it again with sharper focus. The flow is weaker than it was earlier. Not stopped, just reduced. You kneel, clearing a small obstruction, widening a narrow section, trying to encourage more movement. The water responds, but only slightly. It is not enough. You lean back, resting your hands on your thighs, and look toward the river in the distance. From here, it is impossible to see clearly, but you sense the difference. The level may be lower than it should be, or perhaps the timing has shifted. A detail that sometimes appears in historical records is that the Nile's flood could vary from year to year, occasionally falling short of expectations and leading to reduced yields. You do not think in terms of records. You think in terms of what you see in front of you. The soil is telling you something. You stand and walk the edge of the basin again. Your steps slower now, more deliberate. Each section you check confirms the same pattern. Slight dryness, uneven distribution. Not a disaster, but not ideal. A question that continues to occupy historians is how farmers adapted to years of less favourable flooding and how resilient these systems were in the face of environmental variation. Some suggest that careful management and community cooperation helped mitigate the effects. Others point to periods of hardship when the river did not behave as expected. As you move along the ridge, the question feels immediate. You return to the channel and work again, adjusting, clearing, shaping. The effort is precise, but the response is limited. You cannot create water where there is not enough. You can only guide what is there. You pause your hands, resting on the tool, your breath steady but slightly heavier. In the distance, you notice others moving in a similar pattern, walking their fields, checking their channels. The same awareness spreading quietly across the land. No one speaks of it loudly. There is no need. The signs are visible to those who know how to read them. A small, curious observation sometimes noted is that farmers often developed a shared understanding of environmental conditions without formal communication, simply by observing the same changes in their surroundings. You feel that shared awareness now, even without exchanging a word. You stand for a moment, looking across the field. The work you have done still matters. The soil you have turned, the channels you have shaped, all of it contributes to what will come. But there is a limit to what your effort can achieve when the conditions themselves shift. You take a slow breath. The air feels slightly cooler now, though the heat has not fully left. The light continues to change, stretching shadows a little longer across the ground. You return to the plough. The work continues, though your movements carry a different awareness now. Each line you draw is shaped not just by routine, but by the quiet calculation of what might come. You guide the animals forward. Step, guide, adjust. The rhythm holds. The soil parts. The line forms. Yet beneath it all, there is a subtle tension. A question without a clear answer. Will it be enough? You continue, because there is no alternative. The day moves forward, and so do you. The light begins to soften, almost without you noticing at first. The harsh brightness of midday loosens its grip, giving way to a warmer, gentler tone that stretches across the land. The shadows grow longer again, tracing the ridges and furrows you have shaped throughout the day. You guide the plough through one final line, then bring the animals to a stop. This time the pause feels different. It carries a sense of completion, not of the work entirely, but of what can be done today. You stand still for a moment, your hands resting on the handle, your breath steadying as your body begins to release the tension it has held for hours. The field lies before you, marked by your effort, shaped by your attention. You step away. The animals shift, lowering their heads slightly, their own movements slowing as the day begins to wind down. You reach out, placing a hand briefly against one, a quiet acknowledgement of shared labour. Then you turn toward the village. The path feels familiar, though your steps are heavier now. The ground, still warm, carries the last heat of the day. The air has changed softer, carrying faint traces of cooking fires, beginning to come to life. As you approach, the sounds return. Voices low and steady. The clink of clay vessels. The soft crackle of fire. You step into the space near your home, where the evening routine has already begun to unfold. A small fire burns steadily. Its flames controlled its light, warm against the fading brightness of the sky. A vessel rests above it, its contents slowly heating, releasing a scent that drifts outward. You sit. The motion is slow, deliberate, your body settling into a position that feels both familiar and deeply needed. The ground beneath you is firm, the warmth from the fire reaching your hands as you extend them slightly. Food is passed to you. Simple. Bread again, though slightly different in texture, perhaps made from a different batch of grain. A small portion of something else accompanies it. Vegetables maybe, softened by cooking, carrying a faint sweetness. A firmly established detail about ancient Egyptian daily life is that evening meals were often modest, built around the same staples as earlier in the day, yet they held a different significance. They mark the transition from labour to rest. You take a bite. The taste feels fuller now, not because the food has changed significantly, but because your body responds to it differently after a day of effort. You chew slowly. Around you, others eat as well. The conversation is quiet, unhurried. Small exchanges, observations about the day, a mention of the water, a brief comment about the officials who passed through earlier. Nothing dramatic, yet everything meaningful. A lesser-known detail sometimes discussed is that shared meals played an important role in reinforcing social bonds within households and communities, providing not just nourishment but a space for connection and continuity. You feel that here in the rhythm of eating together. A child speaks their voice, carrying a hint of excitement as they describe something from earlier, perhaps the moment in the field, perhaps something else. The details are small, but the energy is noticeable. You listen. You respond with a few words, your voice quieter than theirs, shaped by the long day behind you. The fire crackles softly. The light shifts further the sky beyond the village, now moving toward deeper shades of orange and blue. The transition is gradual, almost gentle. A topic that continues to invite reflection among historians is how much of daily life was shaped by these cycles of labour and rest, and how individuals found moments of meaning within them. Some emphasise the relentless nature of the work. Others highlight the balance created by routines like this, where effort and recovery exist side by side. You take another bite. The warmth of the food spreads through you, easing something in your chest, in your shoulders. You drink. The liquid is familiar, grounding. The conversation continues, then fades, then returns again in small waves. No one speaks loudly. There is no need. The day is ending, and with it the need for intensity. You finish your meal, brushing the last crumbs from your hands. The fire burns lower now, its light softer, its warmth still present but less urgent. You lean back slightly, your body settling further into rest. The sounds around you soften, voices quiet, movement slow. The village begins to draw inward, preparing for the night. You sit for a moment longer, letting the transition fully take hold. Then you rise. There is one more step before rest, and you take it. You step away from the fading warmth of the fire and into the softening light of evening. The air has changed again, carrying a gentler coolness that settles across your skin like a quiet relief after the long heat of the day. The village grows still around you, not silent, not entirely, but quieter in a way that feels intentional. Voices lower, movement slow. The steady rhythm of labour has given way to something softer, something that asks less of your body and more of your awareness. You move toward the place where you rest. The ground feels different now. Beneath your feet, no longer hot, but still holding a trace of warmth that will fade as the night deepens. Above you, the sky stretches wide, shifting from the last traces of orange into deeper shades of blue. The first stars appear. You pause, looking upward. They seem distant, fixed, yet familiar. You have seen them every night yet, each time they carry a quiet presence that never fully loses its meaning. A well-supported insight about ancient Egyptian belief is that the night sky held deep symbolic importance, often associated with cycles of life, death and renewal, with stars and celestial patterns linked to divine order. You do not think in such formal terms, yet you feel the steadiness of it. The sky remains constant, even when everything else shifts. You lower yourself onto your woven mat, the surface firm, but welcoming in its familiarity. Your body responds immediately, releasing the tension it has carried throughout the day. Your shoulders settle, your back relaxes. Your legs, still holding the memory of each step, begin to ease. You lie still for a moment, letting the sensation spread. The sounds of the village drift in gently, a soft murmur of voices fading into quiet, the faint crackle of a fire settling into embers, the distant call of an animal softened by distance. And beyond all of it, the river. The Nile continues its slow, steady movement, a constant presence even in the dark. You cannot see it from here, but you know it is there. You can hear it if you listen closely, a quiet rhythm that matches the slower pace of your own breathing. A small, curious detail sometimes mentioned in discussions of ancient life is that the natural sounds of the environment, water, wind, animals, would have been far more prominent in daily experience than in most modern settings, shaping the way people perceive silence and rest. You notice that now. There is no complete silence, only layers of gentle sound. You shift slightly, adjusting your position, finding the place where your body feels most at ease. The linen beneath you is cool now, no longer touched by the heat of the day. Your eyes close. The darkness is soft. Your thoughts move more slowly, no longer focused on tasks or decisions, but drifting through impressions of the day. The soil beneath your hands, the steady pull of the plough, the sound of water moving through the channels, the brief rhythm of music in the village. Each memory passes lightly without urgency. A question that continues to linger in the study of ancient lives is how individuals experienced rest, whether it was a simple absence of labour or something deeper, a moment of quiet connection to the rhythms that governed their world. As you lie here, the answer feels present. Rest is not separate from the day, it is part of it. The final movement in a cycle that will begin again. Your breathing slows. In, out, steady. The air grows cooler as the night settles more fully. The ground releases the last of its warmth. The sky deepens, the stars becoming more numerous, more visible. You remain still. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to carry, only the quiet continuation of the world around you. The river flows. The air moves. The village rests, and you at last allow yourself to follow. Your body sinks further into stillness, your thoughts fading into a soft, indistinct calm. The sounds around you blur gently, becoming part of something larger, something steady and unchanging. The Nile continues its endless journey beside you. The land waits for the next light, and you drift slowly into sleep. As your breathing settles into a slow, even rhythm, the world around you seems to soften even further. The edges of sound blur gently, as if wrapped in a quiet layer of stillness. The river's presence becomes more distant, not because it has moved, but because your awareness no longer needs to follow it. The day with all its effort begins to dissolve. The lines you drew in the soil fade from your mind. The weight of the plough, the heat of the sun, the small decisions that filled each moment all drift away, leaving only a sense of completion. Your body feels heavier now, not with strain, but with rest. Your shoulders sink deeper, your hands loosen, even your breathing feels softer, quieter, as if it is becoming part of the night itself. Above you, the stars continue their silent patterns, steady and unchanging. You do not need to see them any more to know they are there. Their presence is enough, constant and calm. The air moves gently across your skin, cooler now, carrying the faintest trace of the river and the land that surrounds you. It feels soothing, almost like a quiet reassurance that everything continues as it should. There is nothing expected of you now. No task waiting, no effort required, only rest. The village sleeps around you, each home settling into its own quiet rhythm. The fires have dimmed, the voices have faded, even the animals have grown still. And you follow. Your thoughts slow further, becoming softer, less defined, until they slip quietly into silence. The night holds you. The river flows beside you. And somewhere beyond your awareness, the next day begins to wait, gently, patiently, until you are ready to wake again. Sweet dreams.